Quite a sight in the Sahara Desert. One of the driest places on Earth has flooded. Torrential rainfall in southeastern Morocco swamped the desert for the first time in half a century.
In the western reaches of Egypt's Sahara Desert, there is a vast stretch of land that lies far below sea level. It is silent, uninhabited, and harsh even by desert standards. Salt flats and shallow swamps break the monotony of sand, and temperatures regularly push beyond what humans can endure for long. This place is known as the Qattara Depression, and for more than a century, engineers, geologists, and governments have looked at it not as empty land, but as an opportunity. The Qattara Depression covers roughly 7,000 square miles, an area comparable in size to the U.S. state of New Jersey. At its lowest point, it sits nearly 200 feet below sea level. Getting out of it without modern transport would be extremely difficult. Yet this very depth is what has drawn attention since the early 20th century. If seawater could be brought here from the Mediterranean, gravity alone would do the rest. The idea of flooding the Qattara Depression is not new. British surveyors first mapped the region in detail after World War I, and almost immediately proposals began to appear. By 1912, engineers were already discussing whether the elevation difference between the Mediterranean Sea and the desert basin could be used to generate electricity. In 1927, British geologist John Ball formally presented the concept, turned the Sahara's lowest point into a massive hydroelectric system. At the time, Egypt was under British influence, and colonial planners were looking for large-scale projects that could extract value from what they saw as unused land. Even then, the desert was not dismissed as worthless. It was viewed as a resource waiting to be transformed. The concept resurfaced repeatedly throughout the 20th century. In 1957, during the height of Cold War optimism about large engineering projects, the idea reached an unexpected audience. A proposal was presented to U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower, outlining a plan to flood the Qattara Depression using seawater. According to internal assessments, the project promised several benefits: electricity generation, job creation, regional development, and even long-term climate moderation. At the center of these renewed efforts was Frederick Bassler, who in 1964 became head of an international advisory group studying the feasibility of what became known as the Qattara Sea. For nearly a decade, Bassler promoted the project globally, searching for funding and technical solutions. The challenge, however, was enormous. The Mediterranean lies between 34 and 60 miles from the depression, depending on the chosen route. Between them stands the El Alamein El Difa Plateau, a rocky ridge rising more than 600 feet above sea level. Cutting a sea level canal through this barrier would require removing an extraordinary volume of rock. Tunneling beneath it would be no easier. On top of that, northern Egypt remains heavily contaminated with unexploded landmines left behind from World War II, making large-scale excavation dangerous and slow. Faced with these obstacles, some proposals turn to extreme solutions. One of the most controversial involved the use of so-called peaceful nuclear explosions. Under this plan, more than 200 underground nuclear detonations would be used to blast a channel through the plateau, creating a direct path for seawater. Each explosion would have been many times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The idea aligned with Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, which promoted civilian uses of nuclear technology. But the risks were impossible to ignore. Tens of thousands of people would need to be evacuated. Radioactive contamination was a serious concern. Shockwaves could potentially destabilize the nearby Red Sea Rift, a tectonically active region. The plan was ultimately rejected, even by its strongest supporters. By the 1970s, the Qattara project faded from public discussion, largely due to cost. Traditional excavation was prohibitively expensive, and nuclear options were politically and environmentally unacceptable. Every cost-benefit analysis reached the same conclusion: the risks outweighed the gains. Yet the idea never fully disappeared. Periodically, scientists and engineers returned to it, rerunning calculations as technology improved. The logic remained compelling. The depression's depth meant that once water entered, no pumping would be required. Gravity would pull seawater inward, and the intense desert heat would ensure rapid evaporation. If inflow and evaporation were balanced correctly, a constant current could be maintained, ideal for generating electricity. In April 2023, Egypt took the most serious step in decades toward revisiting the project. A contract was signed with EGIT Consulting to conduct a new comprehensive feasibility study. The reasoning was simple: the world had changed. Tunnel boring machines had advanced dramatically. Renewable energy was now a priority. Egypt's population had grown, and its energy needs had increased sharply. Modern tunnel boring machines are among the largest and most complex machines ever built. Some are as long as 14 buses and weigh as much as a small fleet of trains. They grind through rock continuously, installing reinforced concrete linings as they advance. Egypt is already familiar with this technology. Similar machines were used to dig tunnels beneath the Suez Canal and to construct large sections of the Cairo Metro. From a purely technical standpoint, building tunnels beneath the plateau is now possible, though still extremely expensive. Another option under consideration is a pipeline system linking the Mediterranean to the depression, or even connecting indirectly through the Nile system, though that would require hundreds of miles of infrastructure. Once seawater reaches the depression, the physics becomes straightforward. The basin sits nearly 200 feet below sea level. Water would rush in naturally. The Sahara's extreme heat would cause rapid evaporation. This evaporation is not a problem. It is the mechanism that drives the system. Continuous evaporation creates space for more seawater to flow in, generating a steady current that can be harnessed by turbines. Early designs for the first power station, known as Qattara 1, estimated an output of around 670 megawatts. Later stages could raise total capacity to nearly 5,800 megawatts, roughly equivalent to 6 modern nuclear reactors. Additional designs include pumped storage systems, where water is moved between upper and lower reservoirs to store energy, effectively turning the desert into a massive natural battery. Beyond electricity, the project could support large-scale desalination. Seawater flowing into the depression could be partially diverted through reverse osmosis or electrodialysis plants, producing fresh water for agriculture and settlements. Egypt already operates more than 125 desalination facilities and plans to dramatically expand capacity by 2050. Integrating desalination with the Qattara project could provide water in regions far from the Nile. Over time, the new body of water would become increasingly saline as evaporation leaves salt behind. This would gradually turn the basin into a hypersaline lake, similar to a vast salt pan. While this limits long-term freshwater use, it opens other possibilities. Salt mining could become a major industry, and interest is growing in extracting lithium and other valuable minerals from saline deposits, materials critical for modern batteries and renewable technologies. Supporters argue that the presence of a large water body would also alter the regional climate. Increased humidity could reduce temperatures, suppress dust storms, and potentially increase rainfall. Fish farming, tourism, and new settlements could follow. Some projections suggest that tens of millions of people could eventually live in the broader development corridor linked to the project. Critics remain cautious. The environmental consequences of altering water circulation in the Mediterranean are not fully understood. Coastal erosion, changes in currents, and long-term ecological impacts must be carefully modeled. The financial cost would be immense, running into tens of billions of dollars. And like many mega projects, success would depend on precise execution over decades. Egypt's energy situation adds urgency to the discussion. The country relies heavily on fossil fuels, particularly natural gas, which accounts for more than 80% of electricity generation. Domestic demand has doubled over the past 20 years, and declining gas production has forced Egypt to import expensive liquefied natural gas. Energy independence has become a strategic priority. Hydropower currently supplies only a small fraction of Egypt's electricity. and most of the Nile's potential has already been exploited by the Aswan High Dam. Renewable sources like wind and solar are expanding. But large, stable baseload power remains a challenge. The Qattara project, if realized, would be unlike any power station Egypt has ever built. Whether it will ever move beyond studies and models remains uncertain. Energy independence has become a strategic priority. Hydropower currently supplies only a small fraction of Egypt's electricity. And most of the Nile's potential has already been exploited by the Aswan High Dam. Renewable sources like wind and solar are expanding. But large, stable baseload power remains a challenge. The Qattara Depression has been called a dream, a warning, and a test of human ambition. What is clear is that for more than a century, this silent basin in the Sahara has continued to draw attention, challenging each generation to reconsider what is possible when geography, technology, and necessity intersect. The Qattara Depression has been called a dream, a warning, and a test of human ambition. What is clear is that for more than a century, this silent basin in the Sahara has continued to draw attention, challenging each generation to reconsider what is possible when geography, technology, and necessity intersect. The Qattara Depression has been called a dream, a warning, and a test of human ambition. What is clear is that for more than a century, this silent basin in the Sahara has continued to draw attention, challenging each generation to reconsider what is possible when geography, technology, and necessity intersect. The Qattara Depression has been called a dream, a warning, and a test of human ambition. What is clear is that for more than a century, this silent basin in the Sahara has continued to draw attention, challenging each generation to reconsider what is possible when geography, technology, and necessity intersect.